What I'd like to show you is some of the mathematics involved with the Saturn pattern of hexagons. And this is the Saturn pattern that I had shown in a prior video with the different glyphs associated with it, including the glyph that I had came up with myself. Essentially, I came up with all these myself. What these glyphs are is they're ancient pictographs that had been used in the Semitic region of the world, which is what we call the Middle East now. And I discovered that the glyphs fit within the flower of life pattern, and that's how I came up with all these glyphs that are here. I took the ancient Semitic glyphs that have been discovered and I formatted them into the flower of life pattern. So what I'd like to show in this video is about the mathematics involved with this pattern. Now, some of the mathematics involved is simply this. Okay. Now, as you see, I numbered all of the hexagons, and the three middle hexagons I left at number 23. There's a total of 25 hexagons, 22 original glyphs, which left the three open spaces which I attributed the number 23 to. Now, interestingly enough, in this pattern you may have already noticed that wherever there's a 23, excuse me, not a difficult time, I'm trying to do this on my computer webcam. You see, okay, you have number 23 in the center. The number next to it is a number 8, and then the opposing side is number 15, which makes 23. And now the same occurrence happens at every other angle. You have a 9 and a 14, which makes 23. You have an 18 and a 5, which makes 23. And that's a kind of interesting pattern that developed. But then it extends to the next level. If you go 2 out, you have the number 17. You go 2 out this direction, you have the number 6, which makes 23. And that also happens with the other numbers in the other angles. Over here you have a 4, which is 2 out from this angle. Over here you have a 19, which makes 23. You have a 2 and a 21, 23. You have a 20 and a 3, 23. You have a 1 and a 22, a 22. I mean a 23, excuse me. So I was just trying to show that interesting pattern that mathematically evolves out of this. Now, if you take the numbers and you run them backwards, opposite a reflection, you obviously can overlap the 2. If you would overlap the 2, and then every single one of them would be 23, but obviously if you added the 23s together you'd end up with 46 at each one of these locations. But an interesting thing that occurs is all these patterns can be overlapped at an angle. And I'll show the mathematics of that later, what that does. But they can all be connected to make an infinite pattern with these hexagons. Now, another thing that came interesting when I was researching and doing this is it became obvious that that Saturn pattern, what it actually was 2 equilateral abstract triangles. And as you see, I cut the pattern in half and discovered that, well, there's an equilateral triangle here and there's an equilateral triangle there. Now, interestingly, that comes in with the ancient Egyptian notion of the pyramids, and what is above is also below. And as I mathematically shown how you end up with the same mathematical patterns, which everything equals to 23, and that center would be a 46, that center would be a 46, and that center would be a 46. But everything else would be a 23. And as the ancient saying goes, what is above is also below. That's the mathematics behind that saying, and that's what I wanted to show with that. Now, there was another interesting discovery that I had, excuse me, and that was if a person was to take 5 of these Saturn patterns, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, here's 4, here's 5. It would come up with this shape here, which I'll show you a larger shape. Same thing. It's the same exact pattern. That's a bit more colorful because I was starting to do some research on the light frequencies involved that holds this whole spectrum together. But anyhow, this is that interesting pattern. So, if you take that pattern, which this is cut out of a hexagon, and you fold it to bring it back together, what you end up with is a 3-dimensional star, which we've seen this star typically on law enforcement badges. And it's 3-dimensional, it bulges out in this area and it's flat here. And we also recognize this shape here, or we should anyhow, from the Chrysler Corporation, that they like this pattern here. But essentially all this is this is one end of an octahedron. Now if you would take 2 of these patterns that were folded like that and join them together, you would get an octahedron. And that's what that is. I did that myself, but that's a bit crude, it's a bit lopsided, but that's what it is. Now, interestingly enough, an octahedron, a shadow reflection of an octahedron is a hexagon. That's the shadow reflection. But there's also further shadow reflections that make hexagons. And I'll show you a little more mathematics here that I have. I'm not going to fully explain it, but I'll just show it to you. Here's some more of the mathematics I have, and as you see where the 11s and 12s meet up, I did some line correspondence here with the 11s and the 12s, and decided, well, there's a mixing occurring there. And the reason I say that is because the mixing occurs when I take the other numbers, which I had shown in the beginning of this video, right here, and they overlapped, and that's what I mean by a mixing of the numbers. The 11 here would mix with the 12, and the 12 would mix with the 11. Now, interestingly enough, this other shape I'm about to show you is of a PF6 salt crystal structure, right there. Now, I got a note on there for myself. But this particular shape here, as you see, I was drawing on it, working on some scientific explanation and mathematics involved in it. But as you see here, the shadow reflection of this is also a hexagon. You might not be able to see it. Maybe like that you can see it. It's kind of hard to see it on the video. But you could look up PF6 salt crystal structure, and you should be able to see that, and that's what this shape is a cubo-octahedron, that the shadow reflection is a hexagon or a hexagram. And this particular structure has 8 equilateral triangles and 6 squares. That's what this particular shape is. But I found that kind of interesting of some of this geometry that comes out of it. And here's for a reference right here, this is what the PF6 salt symbol is in science. Which you have the 3 F's at the top, the 3 F's at the bottom, and the P in the middle. P in the middle, and the 6 F's, PF6. I don't remember what that actually means off the top of my head. I think it's, the heck is it? Fluorophosphate or something like that. I have it in my notes. Anyhow, I just thought I'd show some of this interesting mathematics and geometry that have to do with this Saturn pattern.